Why you suck at tanks in Overwatch 2. In this video, we're going over 5 tips that will make you a better tank player, and then you can easily dominate and carry games because tanks are so strong right now. But it looks like only 2.6% of you are subscribed to this channel. So if this is your second video or more you've seen of me, you gotta press that subscribe button. And of course, make sure you join the Discord. Links will be in the description down below. Now, the number one tip and the most important job that a tank player needs to do in every single game of Overwatch is create space. Now, as a quick refresher, space are the areas that you want to control on the map, whether you're dealing damage, healing, or occupying. Controlling space means that there are less angles that enemies can come from, and there's more opportunity that you and your team can make plays from. This is why oftentimes if you're playing a game where you feel like you can't do anything and the enemy is coming from everywhere, that's because they have a ton of space while your team has none. Needless to say, this means that creating space is one of the most important jobs in the game, and as a tank, it's your primary job for several reasons, but the biggest one is that you can occupy a space that is being contested by the enemy and you won't instantly die. If you are a support or you're a DPS and you walk into an area, an objective, a point that has multiple enemies on there, you're gonna just die very, very quickly, right? You don't have the health pool, you don't have the CC reduction, but a tank can actually fight through that and fight on the front line even against opposition. This is always why a tank wants to push forward as much as possible and secure as much space as possible, while at the same time not pushing too far forward that they leave their team in the dust and basically get isolated and killed. I'm going to be doing a tanking VOD review in the future, so if you want a chance to be selected, VOD reviewed, and thrown up on the channel, let me know in the comments down below and I'll pick one of you to actually make a video on. The next thing that you need to be doing on a tank is snowballing one team fights. Now, the team fight is the fight between 5v5 on your team and the opponent's team. You're going at it, you're using your abilities, and the winner typically comes out on top by getting multiple kills and a huge number advantage over the enemy. That being said, what often happens is 3 people on the enemy team dies and 2 of them will run away, and a lot of times they'll get away, and that's not what you want to have happen for several reasons. Those players are free ultimate charge, and wiping them will get your team more ults. That's the first reason. The second reason is these players can start poking ahead of time, and they can maintain a certain amount of space, meaning you can't push up very just aggressively because those players are still alive, and if you push up too much, you could risk getting isolated. And oftentimes, it will allow the enemy to take a much earlier fight than if you would have wiped them, especially if they ran away and wasted all this time and you killed them anyways. But it is important for you to understand that oftentimes it's the tank's job to ensure that the snowball happens. Like, if you have a huge numbers advantage over the enemy, it's not your job to sit on the objective or sit on cart. You want to literally push your body up, take the space that the enemies are trying to retreat from, and allow the rest of your team to help you just eliminate all of the rest of the enemy team. In a huge advantage team fight, the enemy can't just turn the tables on you and manage to kill you, but let's say your DPS just decides that they are going to be the ones that try to chase them down without you. There is always the risk that they might get turned on. Those 2 people that are left alive could turn on your DPS, kill that person, and then all of a sudden, now you're in a situation where they have 2 people still alive, you're down a man, they can regroup faster, take a 5v4, so you're just completely screwed. But if you're a tank and you push up with your team, you can ensure that not only are you guaranteeing those kills and that snowball, but you're making sure that none of your teammates die in the process. The next thing that you need to be doing on a tank that's very important is contesting key DPS. Now, this is going to be different depending on the tank you are. Some tanks are better at doing this than others, but let me give you this example. You're pushing on the cart and there's an enemy Ashe that's standing alone on the high ground and you're D.Va. You are very capable of completely forcing her out of that position. She can no longer stand above your team just shooting your entire team and throwing dynamites. You can fly up there, either kill her or force her completely off that angle, and every time she tries to take that space, you cut that space from her every single time, over and over and over again, because that makes her far less effective. If you don't go and contest this person and your DPS are doing something else, fighting the enemy tank, fighting the other enemy DPS, whatever the case may be, that Ashe could potentially get pickoffs on your DPS, they could get pickoffs on your supports, and if left uncontested, she's going to get way more value when you could spend a very small amount of time to completely shut down her impact. In addition to that, one of the key aspects of a tank is shutting down enemy DPS plays. This is done by peeling, and as an example of that, let's say that you are Zarya, right? And you know the enemy Genji has a Dragon Blade. He goes in with a Dragon Blade, but because you knew that Dragon Blade was coming, you were much more reserved with your bubble use, and you have 1 or even 2 bubbles left, so that when the Genji dashes in, trying to get that reset, you're ready and waiting to bubble your team, protect it from the Dragon Blade, focus the Genji down, and now, because you were smart, you thought about things you needed to contest, and you played around the enemy ultimate, you won an entire team fight by properly saving your peeling ability. What you need to understand here is that tanks have a ton of agency over stopping the enemy DPS plays, and that's something that you should be thinking about often, especially if there's a DPS that is running rampant. That player can't just take you straight up in a 1v1, and oftentimes, if you bail your team out of danger, you can allow them to shut down that DPS as a result. The next thing that you need to be doing when you're playing tank is thinking about the relative teammate position. What are your teammates playing and where are they located? This is very important because the only way that a tank will often die is with massive amounts of focus fire or isolating themselves. Tanks are incredibly strong in Overwatch 2, and as long as you're in the line of sight of your healers that are still alive, as long as you're in their effective healing range, as long as you're not running around the map completely by yourself, it's going to be very hard for the enemy to kill you unless they all focus you down or use ultimates. Because of this, it's really important that you're constantly thinking about where your team is and how you could position in a way that allows them to enable you and you're not getting isolated. You should almost rarely flank with a tank unless there's a key opportune moment, and really only on very select tanks like Roadhog, for instance. And the majority of the time, it's better to play with your team as a tank. Be that frontline force that players can rely on as a form of safety, and they can enable you to basically never die and keep doing your job. Now, if you do these things, then tanks should almost never die first. If you're getting first picked, first demeched, dying first, then typically you're doing something fundamentally wrong, because while it's obvious that you're gonna die if the enemy flank and make a big play and kill your supports and kill your DPS, that's still gonna be you being last alive. If you're the first picked off at all, you're positioned far too aggressively 99% of the time, or you're completely isolated from your team. Now, the last and probably most important thing that you could be doing on tank to just completely diff the enemy team, and that's communicate. And I know for you introverts out there, you got really shy. You're like, I don't think I could do this, but let me explain why this is so important. Calming to your team gets you a crazy amount of value as a tank. The tank is the primary caller. They're the ones that should be calling the strats and dictating the fight, because you're the one who pushes the objectives and you're the one who creates space. Plus, you typically have one of the easiest ultimates to combo with. Tanks are often the vocal force in a game that dictates strategy, rotation, and who to dive, where to dive, and what to do. If you're a tank that is not communicating in your game, you're leaving a ton of value on the table. And I think it's one of the best ways to hard carry on a tank is by being a reliable force that doesn't feed and communicates with your team about strategies. I promise you're gonna win a ton of games just because of that. Plus, if you can keep the energy up, that always helps as well. But let me know what your secret tip for climbing on tank is in the comments down below. Smash that subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I'll see you next time.